yesterday, or whenever it was, I think, yeah, it was yesterday actually, I did an extension using the dipping powder, and if you look for the video on that, you'll see what I've done here. And I want to apply a colour to this now. So I've smoothed it all over. I'm going to get my resin. I'm going to apply it all over the nail. Make sure you get at the sides. And once you've applied your resin, just go back over it so that you know that you've got a nice smooth surface and it's not dried out on you. Because the heat from the fingers sometimes can just dry it out at the edges. So now I'm going to get my powder. I'm going to dribble that all over. Try not to spill it where I don't want it. Right, so now I'm just going to tap that out just to get rid of that excess off the nail. Don't worry about it going on the fingers. As long as you've got no resin on the skin, it won't stick. Right, now I'd go along all my nails just to give that, and also that will give that time just to settle into the surface a bit. You can almost see it just going into the surface. And then when you come back, you need to dust off the excess, because you'll find with powders, other than glitters, they will build up and pick up quite a lot of powder. So sometimes you just need to very, 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 very lightly just dust it off. Then I'm going to go on with the second coat. Be very careful you don't get it on the skin. Get right into the edges. And down the whole nail. Then just go back over to make sure that it's not dried out on you along the edges. I've got a shaky hand today for some reason. Right, don't forget, wipe off your brush before you put it back into your resin. Get your pot as quick as you can, because you don't want it to dry out. Actually, it looks like it has dried out a little bit. Let's just go back on these edges here. You've got to be quite quick when you apply this. Just make sure there's none on the skin anywhere. Would help if these pots were a little bit wider. I have seen some where they are on wider pots. Going all over. Right, so now I'm just going to just tap, tap, tap all the excess off, and this side. And again, I'm going to go along my nails so that has time just to settle in a little bit. And it's just sort of going into there. And then I'm just going to dust off the excess very, very lightly, barely touching. Barely touching. I shouldn't have touched that there. Right, so if you find that you haven't quite covered certain areas where it hasn't picked up properly or whatever, you can go over with another layer and just catch those little areas that you think could have done a little bit better with. But 2 coats is generally all that you'll need. I say it's quite difficult on these dummy hands. They just don't want to bend Whereas a client's finger, you know, you can twist it here, twist it there, and it's fine. With these, it's a bit more rigid. So let's have another go. I know what I've done. I've put that right here. There was a little fold in the towel there, and it was moving the pot. Right, so get all up there. Sides. Make sure you cover all the sides. So you just dribble it over like that. And then tap, 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 tap. Tap, 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 tap. And then it's just a matter then of waiting for that for a few seconds to actually settle in. But you'd be going along all the other nails, so you wouldn't be waiting. So once I've got my 2 layers on, I just need to put a clear layer over the top. So I'm just going to go over this with my resin. Get my thing here. I don't want to transfer anything into there, so I'm just going to make sure that that is completely clean. Just put my clear layer over the top. Just tap it out. And again, that will settle in because you'll be doing all the nails. And then all I'm going to do then is to just very lightly just dust it. Very, very lightly. And then activate it with my activator. Where's it gone? That's it. Make sure you got plenty on your brush. And just brush that out. And then we're just going to file it over and apply our top coat. Right, so now I'm just going to go over with my file. You can go over with an electric file. I tend to use a hand file, to be honest. Don't forget, whenever you're filing a long nail, just support the nail under the front so that you don't keep bobbing the nail up and down. When I'm filing, I can see areas that I haven't filed because they will stay sort of a bright colour. There won't be this like dull grey, which you can tell is an area that hasn't been filed because maybe there was a slight dent there or a little dip. Then as you file over, follow the shape of the nail, of course. As you go over, you'll see it'll all start to just come this one colour. And that's a good way of knowing that you've actually filed it nice and even. I'm being a little bit careful because I don't want to damage this hand really, because it's quite expensive. I just want to keep it nice on the skin areas. I'm not quite sure yet how strong it is. Whether this file will start ragging it all up or whatever. I think it was about £300 this was. But it looks real, doesn't it? It looks like a real nail. Now I'll get my block. Just go all over. Tip is coming out slightly, let's push it back in. Does that feel like pretty good? So I'm just going to wipe it all over where you can dust it off. At this point the client can go and wash their hands, but I'm just going to wipe it with some alcohol, and you can see it's popped out a little bit, so let's push it back in. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is to put thin coat of activator on, and the reason we do this is because it kind of sinks into the surface of the acrylic, and then when you apply your top coat it actually gives a better grip for the top coat. So now we need that dry piece of paper I mentioned. Just wipe off any excess, because you don't want to be touching the surface with your resin while that activator is still wet on the nail, otherwise your brush will go hard. So the first thing we're going to do is just quick coat all over. Don't over brush it, because it is air dry top coat, and if you keep brushing it, eventually it will just start to drag. So you go along all your nails with your first coat, and then once you have got your first coat on, you can come back over with your second coat a little bit more carefully, so that you get all the areas that you may have missed on the first coat. Well, finger is so stiff. There we go. And we just let that dry. As I said, 7 to 8 minutes it should be touch dry. With the dipping powder, when it's time for infills, it will have grown out to about here somewhere. So basically what you need to do now is to get your electric file and drill off all of that colour back to that extension, the clear extension that you did underneath. Just take it all off. You might need to help, and if you notice there, I've got a different drill bit on here. It's either a metal one or this one's actually ceramic. There may be bits here where you just need to file some little bits off. You may need to shorten them for the client or whatever, but then you get left with a gap at the back here. Again, you can use your drill a very shallow angle just to blend in a little bit if it needs it, but it shouldn't need it really very much, because if you remember, we only put one layer of the clear powder underneath this colour, so there should be very little extension gap, ridge. It shouldn't be a big ridge there. That's what I'm trying to say. Shouldn't be a big ridge like you might get more so with acrylic than the dipping powders. And then all you do then is you just put the obviously do the cuticles if they need it. Put the primer along the back. Then put a layer of resin along the back here, and then just with your clear powder just drabble it on, tap it out, and then activate it with the activator. Obviously you're going to have a little bit of a line here where it overlapped, so what you're going to then do is just file that down, block it all over, and then reapply your colour.